From the Asgard Company Studios in beautiful Wichita Falls, Texas, from the finest mind in the modern fitness industry, the one true voice in the strength and conditioning profession, the most important podcast on the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, starting Strength Radio.
Welcome back to Starting Strength Radio. It's Friday, and here we are. And today we're here with our friend Eric Kennedy from Red Barn Butchers here in Wichita Falls, and we are going to talk about the meat business. Now, we've already talked about the cattle business, and we're going to kind of pick up where the cattle business left off and talk about the meat business. Eric, thanks for coming today.
You bet.
Appreciate your being here. Eric runs a butcher shop here in town, and he's been in the meat business for 45 years, and he's got a whole lot of experience at doing this, and I thought we would sit down and pick his brain about what you and I eat and how it gets there. So, Eric, you've been in this business for a long time. Tell us about your background in this.
It started out like a lot of people did, in a little meat shop somewhere, and we did carcass beef at the time. After several years of experience, well, then I moved on down to California, and I've bounced around several different places over the years.
You're from Idaho, right?
Yes.
Right.
And a lot of people have asked me why I've moved around so much, but I tell them I'm a grocery whore because, I was learning experience.
Right.
And so in moving around, though, that I gained a lot of different things from different places, which has helped us tremendously here because we have the base community, that are from everywhere. And so a lot of times when they know what they want and they come in and ask, I already know what it is.
Right. Somebody comes in and asks you for a tri-tip.
Right.
You've actually got one.
We do, yes.
Which is interesting for Texas because nobody here knows what tri-tip is.
They're learning quick, though.
We'll talk more about that in a minute. So you've been doing this a long time, and you've been in every aspect of the retail end of the beef business. What I'd like to know is, we discussed briefly in our previous podcast about the cattle business. We discussed briefly the terminal end of the deal, what happens in the slaughterhouse. Now, it is a sad fact that cattle die when beef is produced. All right, and as we mentioned previously, life is predicated on death. So grow up. So we kill cattle, and we process them into beef. Tell us about that process. I don't want to dwell on this a lot, but we were talking previously about the humane nature of the slaughter business.
Right.
Now. It's highly regulated.
Very.
Very, very regulated. And the point I've made previously was that it's in no one in this business's interest to stress a steer.
Correct.
Before we kill it.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, and there's, why would you invest all that money and time in an animal and then take it somewhere and then just ruin every dime you put into it? It just makes no sense whatsoever.
A carcass that is abused, an injured carcass, a sick carcass, an unhealthy carcass is not worth as much money.
Absolutely. And
the regulations prohibit sick animals on antibiotics from being slaughtered.
Absolutely.
And
sick, injured, even if they have a question about it, they will quarantine it for up to 48 hours just to observe the animal, just to make sure that nothing is wrong with it.
Right.
And that may be a vet coming in to test it or whatever, but they'll watch it strictly.
So they're all big plants have got a quarantine facility.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Big, little, it don't matter. I mean, we had a small operation and we had a quarantine pen. That's the only thing it was used for was quarantining.
Right. So we get them off the truck. We put them in a pen. We feed them. Let them calm down from the trip. Then what happens?
Then they go into the system where they're weighed, and then they go into a chute. Some of them are automatic. Some of them are physical, to where they actually there's somebody standing there to put the animal down. But every part of that is observed by an inspector so that they know exactly what's going on with that animal.
Right.
So there's nothing that goes crazy.
Right. So how do they put them down?
Some of them use an automated knocking pin. Some of them use an actual knocking gun that they stand there and actually knock the animal.
They hit it in the forehead.
Yeah, it's just a light pressure to the animal, and then lights out, and
Right.
so they never
So
know what's going on.
Punches a hole in the frontal
Yeah,
part of its skull, and it loses consciousness instantaneously.
right. And then after that, they pull them out, bleed them out, and then they start processing them down, skinning them, taking the internals out and everything.
Right.
And then once they have that process done, then they have to go through a chilling factor to bring them down to whatever that particular company's HACCP program is on the chill. That way it eliminates any chance of getting any type of other infections or anything else in them.
So the refrigeration basically is immediate.
Oh, yes. Yeah, as soon as that hide comes off, it's split down the middle into halves or quarters, and then straight into the chilling chamber.
And they cool it down for how long?
It's got to be cut down to temp within 2 hours.
2 hours.
Yeah. So, and it's all, we had a digital thermometer that actually was Bluetooth that read straight to the computer to let you know exactly what the temperature was, so that it did a printout, so that nobody was involved in that. Nobody's going in there and saying, hey, we slipped out. This thing is not in where it should be or whatever. But they watch that, and then once that animal is processed, then we like to let it set up. Once it's set up a little bit, then we start processing it further from there. Most places like to do a 14, 21-day age. 14 is kind of the sweet spot. It actually lets the animal set up a little bit, but it doesn't start putting on a lot of the nutty flavor. And when then you go into the 21, 45 days, whatever, then it'll start putting on the nutty flavor of the meat.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. I like it 5 weeks myself,
Right.
but I know that's consumptive of hanging room in the cooler. But I've done this a couple of times, and 5 weeks seems to be the best place.
Right.
If you guys are contemplating aging any beef yourself, well, let's talk about that later. It's a separate topic, because aged box beef and aged sides are two kind of different
Completely
things.
different,
Two
yes.
completely different things, and that's an important topic in terms of you buying this beef. So we mentioned the USDA inspection. Now, I think this is important because the government is heavily involved in the meat industry, and this may be one of the places where the government's involvement in an industry is not terribly destructive. Tell us about USDA inspection.
USDA, whether it's state or it's federal, state meaning that you can keep the product within the state that you're in, federal meaning you can go outside those borders.
Well, does Texas have an inspection authority?
They do.
But does that derive from USDA?
It is. And
So the USDA runs a federal level program and a state level program.
correct. And in some areas, your state inspector may also be a federal inspector, depending on whether they have enough to keep those inspectors busy in that area.
Now, what are they inspecting?
They inspect everything. They inspect the carcass from the time that you start processing it to make sure there's no hair, no feces, no abnormal looks to the skin or the hide or the meat, or
Right, no injuries, no disease,
Absolutely.
no abscesses,
absolutely
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so that's the first step of the inspection. And can an inspector condemn a carcass?
Absolutely. Yeah.
They do it all the time,
Yep.
I guess, don't they?
And then it doesn't go anywhere but in a bone can, and it goes shipped off for
Valley Protein.
yeah, Valley
Inc.
Protein. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no question about it. I mean, it's just done. And same way with a lot of we have a lot of customers that want the green tripe, for their animals and stuff for their raw diet, but they don't allow you to do that anymore. They actually dye it so that you can't use it for anything else. And
What is green tripe?
green tripe is unscalded, unbleached tripe. And
And tripe is third and fourth stomach,
yes,
right?
yes,
From a ruminant.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it's got a lot of nutrients in it, but also,
It's what menudo's made out
yes,
of, right?
Absolutely.
Some people like menudo.
Yep.
I don't.
I've had good, I had bad.
I'd rather have chili. I really would. Oh, God. So the inspectors come in and basically supervise the entire process.
Yes.
From kill to hang.
Yep.
What do they do after that?
After that, they're just mainly looking to see that when you start doing cuts, that nothing can be brought in that can contaminate that animal. It comes down a rail system. It can't touch anything. It can't touch other boxes or stuff that's coming from other plants. If it does, then you have to trim it all off.
Really? Everything's isolated to
Yep.
the single plant. They
Yep.
can't commingle two plants' meat.
No, sir.
Is that right?
Yeah. And if it comes down that rail and it touches...
I guess the reason for that is if something happens and a disease vector is introduced into the product, it allows them to trace it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you have to submit samples anyway once a month, of different things just to make sure that, none of that had E. coli or none of it had any contaminants in it whatsoever. And you have to hold on to that product. That's why there's an inspection bug on the boxes that you get, because that's their way of tracing it back to that plant. And
Plant's got a number.
yeah,
Right.
And that number will trace back to the plant, telling the plant, okay, this is what day it happened, this is who was working, this is what went on, and everything. So.
And they probably trace back to the herd then, can't they?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, because most of the herds now are chipped from calf, and so they know exactly where that animal's been the whole entire time.
Right. And I guess most of this is a result of the BSE thing about 25 years ago, right?
Some of it's from that, and some of it's from cattle rustling back in the day. I don't understand why some of the rules are set up the way they are. It's like they haven't updated the policies, even though they're chipping and they know more about those animals step by step than what they used to.
So they just got some archaic regulations.
Yeah,
that
there's a few of them
still in place.
Yeah.
So I guess they also probably inspect the plant for sanitation and cleanliness,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Every morning you do a pre-op. The pre-op consists of going through all the machinery before you put it together to make sure it's all clean and everything. You do your own pre-op, then the inspector comes in and does a pre-op with you. And if they find anything, then all the equipment has to be re-washed, sanitized, and all put back out for them to observe again.
Before you can use it.
Yes, sir.
So how do you get it clean?
You do
when you're done with the day.
When you're done with the day, you break it all down, do the wash, rinse, and sanitize procedure. You have to be really thorough on some places, like the hamburger plates, saw blades, anything that's going to grip any meat particle or anything else.
So all that's got to be washed out.
Absolutely.
Bleach. Oh.
Well,
what do they use? They probably got some specialized product.
Yeah, the bleach is. We try to steer away from that just because it can be overdone real easily. And so there's a lot of companies out there with real good cleaning chemicals that are already set up. They're already FDA approved. They're already, legit. And
bleach oxidizes your steel components, and you don't want rust and anything. So.
Yeah, it'll. That and salt are the two worst things on equipment.
Right. So every day is concluded with this extensive cleaning process.
Yep.
And I've seen this a little bit, hot water and everything's washed down the drain and the floors are all drained and everything's set up to make everything clean every day.
Correct.
Right. And so are USDA inspectors veterinarians?
Not necessarily, no. There are some that are, but most of them that I've been around are not. They've gone through part of the courses or something, to know what to look for and areas to look for, but they're not actually veterinaries.
What does their background consist of?
Most of them have gone through some type of course at a college, and then they follow it through with a sort of like a trainee program, following alongside another experienced veterinary, or not veterinary, but an inspector. And then that way they've got ideas of what to look for and stuff. They've got to report to somebody just like everybody else does.
Right. Well, I guess the total effect of this rigorous program is to create a clean meat supply for You know, and you just don't see reports in the media, but occasionally of contaminated meat. Every once in a while, they'll recall 100,000 pounds of hamburger,
right,
from somebody screwing something up in this process. I wonder what they do with 100,000 pounds of hamburger when they recall it. Landfill, I guess. Put it in a
I'm
hole.
sure it's in fertilizer or something. I don't know.
That's a lot of money. 100,000 pounds of hamburgers. By the time you pay for transportation, that's $500,000.
Oh, yeah, easily.
Maybe more than that. Is the specialized transportation required? But that's always interesting. You see that in the news every once in a while. But the amazing part is you don't see it in the news. When it's in the news, it's unusual because the system works very well.
It does, yes. And you know they've got so many steps in there placed in each location that it just I don't know how anything would slip through unless somebody's sleeping on the job and
right. Well, that would happen. That does happen occasionally.
Yeah.
So right now in the retail end of the meat business, you've got big grocery stores. You got the big chains. You got Walmart, Kroger, all the brands under which Albertsons operates. These great big giant national chains of grocers, and they've got a supply stream. And then recently we've seen the resurgence of shops like yours, small meat markets. What is the differences between these two opportunities to buy meat to take home to eat?
Well, there's not. In one way, there's not a lot of differences. It may be they're getting some of the same product that I might be getting. The biggest difference is we can stand there and take the time with the customer, find out exactly what they need, help them with cooking instructions, maybe recommend something better than what they were actually thinking about doing or whatever.
Well, no, I mean in terms of the product they're selling. Where does Kroger get its meat as opposed to where do you get your meat? And what is different about Kroger's meat than your meat?
Kroger's meat's going to be, all the top national names, IBP and all them.
So IBP's Iowa Beef Processors.
Right.
Who are the bigger players in this business besides these guys?
They're one of the bigger ones. You've got Cargill, you've got National Beef Company. National Beef Company has come a long way. They just used to be kind of like a small processor, and then they've grown over about the 10, 15 years or so. The bigger plants they had to do like every grocery chain has had to do. They've had to spread out to accommodate everybody, get more growing space for cattle and stuff. So, I mean,
and it makes the shipping simpler.
Absolutely.
Because you don't have a big, long train ride to.
Right.
Back in 1895, I suppose, that everything had to go to Chicago. That was in the formation days of the nation's rail system. But we've got transportation opportunities all over everywhere now. We're not dependent on one location anymore. And the shorter the time,
the less stress on the animal.
The shorter the time back, the less money tied up in refrigeration and transport.
Yep, exactly.
So these things are everywhere.
Yeah. And you want it to be. You want it to say, we know the farm nearby, sells to whatever plant or know. I mean, that's part of the community. You want it to be part of the community.
So when Kroger gets in meat, this is of interest. I know that Sam's, the Walmart wholesale people, and I know that Costco does this too, they have an actual meat cutter in their stores.
Yes, sir.
What about Walmart and Kroger? Do they get T-bones in the little trays?
They're already in the trays in a box.
When they went on the truck.
Yep.
So those things are packaged at a plant.
Yep.
And are transported like that to the retail.
That's
and
correct.
They don't handle anything backstage.
No, sir. No, they're not even allowed to rewrap anything. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Something happens to it, they pull it off and throw it away or something.
Well, and I think it probably has. I don't know if you want to do that. They probably have something with the gases that they flush in some of them trays too. You know, once you take that out, then
Oh, I see. So how's that done? I didn't
don't-
know that's a good idea. Good point. Is there CO2 in
yeah, there's
they
gases
purge the tray and then wrap it
Yeah.
in the presence of CO2 or
lasting
nitrogen or
shelf
whatever.
stability. I mean,
Sure.
they've done tests where they put them actually on a shelf with bread, you know, and left it there overnight, and they come back the next day and it's still red. And you
Right.
do that to any other steak, and it's not going to happen.
Right.
It's going to go dark quick.
Right. Well, that's interesting. It's a good way to preserve the thing. I remember I don't know. I haven't bought grocery store meat in 10 or 15 years, and I don't know. But are they still selling water added beef? Is that what?
They don't
Because the
do it.
last time I bought it, one of the reasons I got into the custom meat purchasing is because I just got sick of the shitty quality of these watery ass steaks that you'd get. 4% solution, they call it, which
Yeah.
is saline, I suppose.
It's not as much in beef as it is in pork and chicken.
Right. Pork and chicken's all water added because
Yeah.
it's cheaper to sell water than it is just to sell
absolutely.
chicken and pork.
Yeah.
But has that stopped in beef? Or what are they-
Yeah, I don't know of anybody that does it. You know, most of the time people, when they're looking at that steak and it's got juice coming out and everything, and they think it's, you know, all the water and everything, but it's actually protein, and very little of it is actually the blood. It's actually
Right.
the water from the animal
Right.
that
So
helps
it's-
keeps it. That's part of why everybody likes it dry aged, because you're
All that's
letting that
gone.
moisture come out of an animal.
all that's gone. So they've that part of the thing has changed over the past 10 or 15 years, I guess. But I guess the primary distinction in a situation like Kroger versus a small shop is the way the meat's handled at the retail outlet. You actually are handling the meat.
Correct.
And they're just setting it on the shelf.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of them, you know, in the Walmart supercenters and stuff like that, they actually, that animal is processed, and then as soon as it comes down to chill temperature, they begin to process it, cut it into steaks and all that stuff. So
It's not aged.
There's no wet age, there's no dry age, there's no nothing. It's just fresh off
Put
the
in the
cow.
tray
Yeah, and then
once it's cool.
sealed, and you know, a lot of times once it goes through the final process of coming out that wrapping machine, then it's given sometimes 14, 21 day shelf life on it. So when you actually get the product in the store, if it's got a 7-day shelf life on it, it may be from 3-4 weeks ago as a steak form, you know, which is
cut
different.
that long ago.
Yeah, which is different from the way we do it, because we get it in the primal form, and then we can, you know, wet age is not a bad thing, and we can definitely dry age it, which is also not a bad thing.
Right. So the primary difference is in handling. Large retail outlets don't handle the beef except to put it on the shelf, and you actually deal with the product yourself.
Absolutely.
So that's interesting. The quality is probably going to be higher in a situation like you've got because of, one, the way it's handled and trimmed and dealt with and sold, and B, the places it's sourced from. How do you source your beef as opposed to Kroger's national office, which has got a deal made with IBP and everybody else, and so you mentioned that you get your beef from a small producer in Kansas.
Right.
So what's the situation with that?
Well, back in the drought, they came to us and wanted us to try their program, their High River Angus program, and we tried it, and I loved it because it's almost exactly like I would produce it if I was from start to finish. And so there's a lot less waste. There's a lot less. It's more affordable in a way because I don't have as much trim losses and stuff on it. But I just like the quality of the product. It's raised at a little bit higher altitude, and you know, a lot of people, when they finish their animals out, they're looking to kind of go a little further north where it's not as hard on the animal.
Right.
And it, yeah, which in the marbling, you know, you get more tenderness. Fat is a natural tenderizer and flavor, so I mean, you want that to be a successful steak.
Sure. So you don't deal with side beef. You deal with box beef.
Correct.
All right. Now tell us what the difference is between side beef and box beef.
The side beef, you have to move a little quicker on some parts of it.
A side is half of a carcass.
Yep.
Hanging from a hook.
Yep.
Right? That's all of the whole beef.
The whole thing.
Whole thing. From sirloin to neck meat.
Yep. Shank, everything.
The whole thing. All these. We won't go into the details of the names of the beef cuts. There are little maps all over the internet for that. But so rounds, sirloins, loin, 4/4 beef, all that stuff. You guys look that up. But side is going to have all of that.
Yes, sir.
All of the cuts.
Yep.
Box has the carcass separated into
primals,
what are called primals. And
Yep.
what are the primals?
You've got the round on the rear end of the animal. And
That's the thigh muscles.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. And then connected with that is the sirloin tip, which a lot of people aren't familiar with that.
As the thigh muscles come up into the hip.
Correct.
So the sirloin is out of the hip
Yep.
area, the pelvis area.
Yep. And that ends up being its own separate primal, the sirloin does. And then it goes into the short loin, which is the T-bone porterhouse or boned out as a New York
That'd be the
strip.
lumbar spine.
Right.
Right.
And then the front quarter into the ribeye section, and then the chuck.
The same muscles that run up the rib cage.
Right.
Right.
And the chuck and the arm and the brisket are all wrapped into one.
That's the shoulder stuff.
Yep.
That's the shoulder area. Are beef ribs used for anything except hamburger?
Oh, absolutely.
Are they?
Yeah.
I always thought that was a waste product myself.
Back ribs, everybody likes to grill back ribs, or the
Beef back ribs.
Yeah, or the short ribs. Everybody.
How
does
is it that I don't like these?
They do the dinosaur now. The dinosaur ribs, the long short ribs.
Well, you're talking about, what do they call that? A tomahawk steak?
No, that's the other part. If you take off the short
Right.
ribs and bone it out, and then you leave the rib bone, and then you got a tomahawk,
Oh, okay. It's fashionable now.
wife beater, or whatever you want to call
Oh God! Big long club, wasted. It's about a half pound of shit you're paying for you can't eat.
it. It's about an 8 ounce of bone, yeah. But it looks
Amazing.
good.
It does look cool. There's a handle for the chef, I
Right.
guess. So what about? All right. So the 4/4 are when you see chuck roast and things like 7-pin roast, and what are some of the other?
Arm roast, brisket,
All that is 4/4
all that
stuff.
off the chuck. Yep.
Where's the brisket?
You actually have to pull the arm back to get to the brisket, and then the brisket runs from the top of where they split the sides in half down to the neck.
So it's in front of the shoulder.
Yes.
It's in front of the shoulder.
Yeah.
What do they do with the neck meat? That's usually ground, isn't it?
It's usually ground. Some people like stew meat. Depending on the age of the animal, you can use the neck bones. Some people like those. Neck bones aren't as popular as they used to be. Bone-in roast aren't as popular as they used to be.
Right.
People have kind of forgotten how to cook.
Yeah. Well, it's not a shock. Huh?
Right?
People know how to text. They don't know how to cook.
Google it.
Neck bones used to be, when I was a kid, they sold soup bones.
Absolutely.
They called them soup bones, and you get them and roast them in the oven.
Yep.
Boil them.
Yep.
And make beef stock out
That's
of it.
right.
And that's the best. Cheap. It's cheap, and it's good. But anymore, I guess you'd have to. Well, shop like you could probably get neck bones, right?
We don't sell as many neck bones as we do femur bones.
But you could get them,
Yeah.
right? If you had an order.
Yeah, most people like the femur bones because they have more marrow in them for making stock, and
Right.
it's a lot healthier for you.
Yeah. Good fat. Our friend Stan Efferding makes that plant that he uses for his Elevate meals, makes their own bone stock out of that. Did you see that video he had the other day, guys? He had a video up of behind the scenes at the thing. They make their own bone broth there just for Stan in the meals, and they put it in with the rice and everything else. And his meals are good. You can Give that a check, staneffording.com. X-Elevate. Forgot about that. I need to turn that off.
Joe?
No, it's not Joe.
Huh?
Not this time. No, it's not Joe. Joe calls me, bothers me all the time. Wants me to be on his show. I told him to get fucked. I'm not going to be on Joe Rogan's show. If he wants a bigger audience, he needs to get it without me. That's all there is to it. So the whole carcass, though, is used.
Absolutely.
There's not any waste on a carcass.
None.
Every piece of that animal goes somewhere.
I take that back. The one part that is not used is the
snout,
spinal cord. No, that's used. Spinal cord and the brain.
Yeah, that's because of the VSE scare. I guess they just can't take a chance on it.
Yep.
Used to, you could buy beef brains.
Absolutely.
A long, long time ago.
Yep.
Pork brains are still for sale.
Yes.
Brains and eggs. I know y'all are. See, they're thinking that I'm crazy. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, you walk in a cafe in Texas and order brains and eggs for breakfast.
Well, I worked at it was at the time it was B&R Thriftway in Iowa Park. I remember us getting some in.
Yeah.
Brains and.
Yeah, I guess they scramble them with eggs. I never had it myself, but I know that it was eaten.
It's not bad.
It was a common thing, but they condemn all of that part of the carcass now.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
When they make a porterhouse or T-bone, do they excavate the spinal canal and get the nerve tissue out of that steak before it's packaged?
Yeah, and if they don't get it all, then we have a tool that we run down the spine. It's just a little U-shaped tool, and you can run it down. And we used to do that on all the cattle when we got it in before they started making them remove it.
Mm-hmm.
They'd come in with it, and the only reason we removed it was because once you went to cut steaks, then it would smear over the meat.
Yeah, it'd scatter it everywhere.
Yeah.
With saw would scatter it across the. And that's probably not a good idea.
No.
Well, they were going to prohibit the practice anyway, so you might as well get ahead of them. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Right. So you guys get in box beef, and box beef is primals, and a primal is sections of a side.
Correct.
So you order what you think you can sell.
Exactly.
Right? And
Exactly.
your inventory at any given time is going to consist of a whole bunch of different box beef. How do you decide what to buy?
It's tough. There's a lot of things that come into the factor. You have to factor what time of the month it is. You have to factor in the weather, whether you've got any holidays or whether you've got any, Super Bowl coming up or whatever. You just kind of have to be a mind reader and figure out where customers are going to go with it. And it's not always easy. Sometimes you run out, but I try to keep my cooler to where it turns every time I get a truck. I get a truck twice a week. And so I try to empty it out as close as I can to the next one, and that way we're always moving fresh product through there.
Right. So if something's not selling as well as you thought it was going to, you cut the price.
Cut the price.
What a fascinating concept.
Yep.
Here we are in a capitalist society, and it's just so odd that works.
Or you find another way to merchandise it.
Right. Now, do you make your own hamburger? You guys grind that,
Yes.
or do you order it in?
No, we grind it on spot. Everything you see in the counter, we'll make 80-20.
Right.
And then we grind chuck tenders for our 90-10, which it has the same consistency as doing round meat, but the texture of the meat is actually more inviting to people.
Mm-hmm.
People like it better because of the texture. It makes a patty where ground round's kind of too dry. It doesn't make a patty.
Do you double grind or single grind?
Double.
Everything's ground twice.
Yep.
Right.
Grind
Well,
it through once,
it
pull the
tastes
knife
better like
out,
that.
pull the bone chips and everything out, because that's what it's designed to do, is catch the bone chips and the
Right.
gristle, and then put back together and grind it a second time.
Mm-hmm. So, my dad ran a cafe here in Wichita Falls for 30, 35 years, and he would make his own hamburger. He had a big Hobart machine in the kitchen, and we ground hamburger every couple of days, and he would buy, this is what we call an aside. he would buy what they called bull meat.
Right.
They used to market a product called bull meat.
Yep.
Now, I remember this. I don't know what cut it was. I don't know, but it was a great big 10 to 15 pound piece of meat that was purple. It was so dark. It had absolutely no fat in it at all. And the muscle fibers were big and fat. And he would use that as the basis for his hamburger meat.
Right.
What the hell was that? Just out of curiosity.
It's just older bull meat that they can't do anything with. And we used to use it all the time
So
for
5-year-old bull just
Yep.
wander. He's not going to grade.
Yep.
Right.
And we'd use it to lean up fatty beef so that you'd actually have a 80-20 blend. Or back then was more popular with a 73-27 blend. But yeah, we used to get it in 60-pound boxes. We'd cut it up the night before from frozen state, let it thaw out, do it as our grind first thing in the morning. And you don't see it as much anymore because back then we did a lot more hanging beef, so we had a lot more fatty beef. We had a lot more trimmings to try and move, and so you had to have something to kind of counter that. Otherwise, you're trimming all that fat off to bring it to a fairly lean consistency, and then it's all going in the trash, and you never get to use it.
Right. Now, to clarify, hanging beef, if you've got a side of beef, all the fat's still on the side.
Right.
All of the fat's around the kidneys, the suet, the nice dry, what we call leaf fat.
Yep.
Is around the kidneys and on the inside of the abdominal wall of the carcass. And that stuff is gone if you're buying boxed beef, because it's all been cut up into primals and you have access to that good fat to use with. And at the same time, he would buy tallow.
Yep.
Not tallow. He would buy suet.
Yep.
He'd buy suet, and he would blend the suet with the bull meat and make the hamburger meat that he wanted there in the kitchen every day. And that's, I guess, what you're talking about doing too, right?
Yeah, and then, if you buy insides of beef, you try to use that fat as much as you can because you've bought that fat, and you've got to try and make a dime off of it instead of just throwing it in the can. And that's primarily why the bull meat and stuff came in. Even though we had to buy the bull meat, it helped us also sell the fat that we just broke down, and so we had to have it somewhere.
And tallow is appearing in the stores now.
It is.
You've seen this? Yeah, it's the suet, when you take the suet fat and render it down, and I've done this in a slow cooker.
Yeah.
You put a whole bunch of it in a slow cooker and render it down and skim the liquid fat off of that and put it in a jar. That is finally coming back after decades of neglect. Buffalo Wild Wings. Now, correct me on this if I'm wrong, but Buffalo Wild Wings fries their chicken wings in beef tallow.
Really?
That's why they taste so damn good.
Didn't know that.
McDonald's fries used to be fried in beef tallow, and it's excellent for frying. It's got a better flavor. But remember back when our friend Ansel Keys destroyed American health with this idiotic insistence that fat was poison. All of that went away there for a while, but it's coming back because of the superior quality of the flavor and the health benefits of not using trans fat when you fry it.
Yeah, and some people are actually using some of it for lotion, soap.
It's a useful product, and if you find somebody that's got access to some suet, buy it.
Yeah,
shouldn't be much money.
Right.
But could you get that in if I order some from you?
We sell it. We have different people, especially during the hunting season. We have a lot of people that come in wanting it to blend with their deer to lean it or fatten it up a little bit because it's too lean. At the beginning of their season, the deer carcasses are so marbled up and fatty from eating, but once they get into the rut, we get bombarded with people wanting either pork fat or.
Oh, but deer suet is horrible.
Oh yeah, it is.
It's like candle wax. You can't really eat it.
Yeah.
It's I got a buddy of mine shot a deer, let me have it several years ago. Real fat all along the back straps, and that fat is yellow.
Yes.
And I made the mistake of cooking a loin roast with the fat on it, and I'm telling you, it's inedible.
Yeah.
That fat's inedible.
Yeah.
It's just horrible. And but deer meat, real lean purple deer meat cut with beef suet is excellent hamburger.
Yeah. Well, and back to your point on, if we grass fed and grass finished every animal that was out there, they're eating a lot of the same thing the deer would eat, and so
There wouldn't be any suet.
yeah, and
Any
the
good
flavor
suet.
would be different, and
Right.
I mean that's the whole reason they feed them out the way they do, is to put that good marble and flavor in it.
So let's talk about the grass-fed versus grain-finished beef. There's been a lot of attention recently paid to how the meat is finished. A lot of people swear by grass-fed beef. I don't like it. I don't like the flavor. But a lot of people prefer it because of the supposed better fatty acid profile that the grass-fed provides. What has been your experience with this?
Yeah, we have a lot of people that ask, whether the product is grass-fed, grass-finished, all cattle.
Probably without knowing what that means.
Exactly. And once you start to talk to them about it and tell them the differences, then they get confrontational, or they just, well, I'll just go ahead and take what you got in the counter, They don't seem to understand, that if you have a grass-fed, grass-finished piece of meat on there, there's a lot of work that goes into cooking that to get it as tender as you would, an over steak where you just have half the time.
A grass-fed medium rare steak would be an acquired taste.
Absolutely.
For me, I'm not interested in dealing with. If I want to eat something that lean, I'll just have venison.
Right.
And venison is perfectly fine medium rare.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine. But beef that's that lean is just
different taste, different texture, everything.
Now, let's talk, because this leads right into the discussion of grade. All right. Tell me about grade and how carcasses are graded and what that actually means.
Grade, the top grade is a prime grade. Most herds, on the average in the United States, only produce 2 to 3% prime grade.
Of 1,000 cattle, 20 or 30 of them.
Yep.
Will produce carcasses that'll grade prime.
Yep, and it'll be right on the edge of being either upper 2/3 choice or prime. And
so choice is the next one down, and
is.
it's usually divided into thirds.
Yes.
Bottom third, middle third, upper third.
Correct.
Upper 2/3 choice.
Correct.
And that's pretty good beef.
It is.
It's pretty good beef.
And it depends on whether you want a ton of marbling in there or not so much. I mean, it is the not so much. I mean, it's got marbling, but
so the grade is dependent on the marbling.
Correct.
And the marbling, for those of you that are confused about that term, is the interstitial fat within the muscle. So if you see a steak that's got white streaks through the meat, that is what is referred to as marbling. And prime is going to have a whole lot of that. About 10 years ago, it was fashionable to call everything in your case Kobe beef. All right, this was always bullshit because by law, Kobe beef could not even be exported from Japan.
right.
If you were eating Kobe beef, you were sitting in Japan eating it.
Yes.
Right, that didn't keep anybody from not calling it Kobe beef. And Kobe beef was supposed to, I believe this is true, supposed to come from Wagyu cattle. Wagyu are a breed
Right.
that was developed in Japan.
Right.
All right. Some of that meat was at least half fat.
Right.
I have, in Korea, bought some steaks at a little corner kiosk that were way up in the prime
Right.
area. They were almost half fat. And it was delicious. Oh,
Yeah.
my God, it was good. Yeah, see?
Yeah.
Delicious.
That is an extremely expensive product because anything that grades that high, and by grade we mean marble, anything grades that high is such a tiny percentage of the beef that's produced by the national herd that it's something like that. is a product of an extremely specialized breeding program.
Correct.
It's all genetics.
Yep.
It's how they convert graze and grain into meat.
Right.
And they lay a bunch of fat down in their muscles. And it's probably a disease process. But the flavor of the meat is
Incredible.
popular. It's
Yep.
it's real good. If you ever had any, congratulations. So as we start at prime and go down, we're actually talking about the amount of marble. And underneath choice is select, and that's what you see mostly in the grocery store, right?
It's not as
Unless
popular anymore,
Really?
but you do see it in some lower end markets, some Hispanic markets. You know, they'll carry the select, and mainly because they're cutting it thinner and they're marinating it, or
Right.
they're doing something different with it.
Right. They're not really using it the way we would
Right.
fry or grill the steak.
Right.
Right. And underneath select is what?
No roll.
No roll. All right.
No roll is a real lean piece of meat. There's not a lot you can really do with it. A lot of them use it for canner meat.
Right.
It grinds fine, and it'll give you the flavor of beef fine.
If you put fat in.
Right. But
Right.
you've got to have something else with it in order for it to be.
Now, there used to be a grade called utility.
Yeah.
Is that still available?
Yeah,
That's
it's not available to us.
That's dog food stuff.
yeah,
Right.
and,
And what is cutter canner? Same thing?
Oh, they make more like Denny Moore stew and stuff
Right.
like that, where they put it in huge pressure cookers and cook it down and stuff.
Get it soft.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's lean and it's good. It serves a purpose.
Right. These lower grades. But if you're looking at a steak in the grocery store, you're probably going to be looking at choice,
Choice or up.
lower
Yep.
third choice, something like that, right?
Yep.
So, what do you carry in your butcher shop?
We carry upper 2/3 choice to prime.
Right.
The sirloins are always prime. I just like the flavor and the texture, and I'm a sirloin guy. I'm not a ribeye guy.
You know, I'm telling you, you and I agree on that. There's a whole bunch of people that think that I'm crazy because I will prefer the flavor of a sirloin over the flavor of a ribeye. And I'll tell you how this happened. I've been in on the eating of a bunch of sides of beef I bought a side. So I've got all these cuts of meat in my freezer. I've got the sirloins, I got the T-bones, porterhouses, the ribeyes. I've got the aged hamburger. We'll talk about age in a minute. Oh my God, that's the best stuff in the world. Oh, it's good. And just all of the 4-quarter stuff. Of all of that meat off of every one of the whole sides that I've bought, the best tasting steaks were the sirloins.
Yep, I agree.
And most people will, it's fashionable to like ribeyes, I guess. But as far as the flavor of the meat is concerned, the sirloin is the best. It's handy that it's also cheaper.
Yes.
But that's not my fault. Okay? Sirloins, if you can find a fatty sirloin, it's hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I carry the prime grade, because it just.
If you can find prime sirloin. Now, for some reason, my favorite steakhouse in the world, those of you that have access to the 2 locations in Houston and the one in Dallas, is Pappas Brothers Steakhouse. I've been eating in very, very good steakhouses all over the country, and the best steakhouse I've ever eaten in is Pappas Brothers Steakhouse in Dallas. They don't offer a sirloin.
Really?
I don't know why that is. They don't sell a sirloin. There's not one on the menu. All of their meat is in the case. As you walk in the door, you can see all the meat in the case. It's all dry aged, but it's all loin and ribeye. And they don't sell a sirloin. And I've asked about it one time, and he told me that we can't get prime sirloin.
Really?
But I've seen it.
Yeah, I carry
And I
it.
don't know what the hell's going on there. I don't know if he's just telling me something to get me to shut up, but I always wondered about that. But that is That's a marvelous place, and all they sell is prime. They don't have anything in the store that's not prime, and it's a specialized market, and they worked very hard to develop supply chains to supply them nothing but prime beef.
Yeah.
Because as you mentioned, 2 to 3% of the
Right.
national herd will grade prime, and that's not a hell of a lot of beef, and a lot of it's already spoken for.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
That's what most people don't understand is that a lot of it's booked out, so far in advance that
Right.
if you're fortunate to get some, grab it, because,
Right.
But
It's expensive, and there's a reason it's expensive. Now, the way they grade a carcass is interesting to me. And what I understand is they grade the side.
correct.
They grade the whole side, and whatever the side grades, all of the meat on the side carries that grade.
Yes, sir.
And they'll cut it between the 6th and the 7th rib.
Yep.
So when the thing is hanging and cooled off, they'll go in the cooler and take the knife and cut the thing from all the way down the rib to the spine and look at the cross-section of that ribeye between the 6th and the 7th rib.
Yep.
And whatever that is the grade the carcass carries.
Correct.
Now, that may or may not mean that the rest of the beef on that carcass grades prime.
Exactly.
But they have to make the decision about it somehow. How reliable do you think that grading method is? In other words, if I cut this side between 6 and 7 and it's marbled sufficiently to be called prime, how likely is the sirloin to be prime?
It really depends on the breed of the animal.
Right.
And they've gotten away from that somewhat in some of the larger facilities to where they actually have probes that go into the side in 5 different spots, and it's read by computer
Right.
to tell for your very reason right there, because sometimes it didn't always grade. You look at a
Right.
ribeye, and of course that's the fattiest piece anyway. That inspector's only got a matter of seconds to grade that and stamp it.
Right.
And roll it on down. So now they've got the computers that will actually probe that. It somehow deciphers how much fat content is actually in there, and then register that, and then somebody else stamps it.
Well, that's good, because that would keep you from ordering a box of prime loins and having them come in middle choice.
Oh, and it's happened.
Actually, middle choice.
Yeah, it's happened.
I bet it does.
Yeah. And then, but on the other end of it too, you'll get some that you order in upper 2/3 choice, and it'll be so marbled up, you're thinking, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So, but
Well-
it does happen. Once they stop one chain and, one process of animals, and then they bring in the second row of them or whatever, there may be 1 or 2 that actually get in the wrong box, or
Right.
I've had some that have been just absolutely horrible that, I went and got credit on, and
Oh, no, you call the guy up.
yeah, I
said,
call them and get credit on it, and then make
Right.
it into cutlets or something,
Right.
because nothing else I'm going to do with it.
Right. Can't sell it for upper 2/3.
Yeah, no.
Doesn't work that way. So now that we know what grade is, let's talk about age, because age is very important. Age is a process that takes place within the muscle of the carcass, either as it's hung or as it lays in the box. There are enzymes in the muscle, proteolytic enzymes in the muscle, that are supposed to be there and are normally present in all muscles because of the fact that muscle tissue is constantly being degraded and replaced in the living animal. Once the animal's killed, the enzymes don't go away. They remain, and these are catalyst enzymes that remain in the muscle that continue their process of breaking down muscle protein. If the meat is refrigerated at, for example, usually 38 degrees Fahrenheit, and hung on a hook, the enzyme activity, it's not a bacterial process. Those of you that think this has something to do with bacteria, it does not. Absolutely not what it's about. It is about proteolytic enzymes in the meat continuing to break down the muscle tissue after the animal is hung and cooled off. And this process continues up until the time the thing's cooked. Aged beef is more tender than fresh beef, like we're talking about in the tray at Kroger's. Aged beef has got a different flavor. It's got a different texture, and the grade of the carcass controls to a great extent how long you can age the beef.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you try to do, a no roll or even a select, it will begin to just basically rot from the outside in instead of actually doing what it's meant to do. If you have a choice or a prime, then once those start to break down, and especially if you can allow the animal to hang from the hook, it actually has a natural process of pulling the sinew and every muscle and everything downward to where it actually,
because the stretch, the tension effect,
it begins to pull it apart to where it gives it that tenderness.
Right.
And then depending on how aged you want it, then you start to lose the moisture out of it, which they call shrink, and then the flavor starts to enhance into a somewhat of a nutty flavor.
It's a different flavor than unaged beef. It's some people like it, some people don't.
Exactly.
You had to eat it once before you can appreciate the vast difference between dry aged beef at 5 weeks, as I previously mentioned, I prefer, to unaged beef. The way the animal grades largely determines the amount of fat within the muscle, but it also determines the cap of fat over the whole carcass that protects the meat underneath it during the aging process.
Correct. And the more fat, the better if you're wanting to age for any period of time, because it'll help protect everything that's on the internal. Now, it may not look appetizing,
but that's trimmed off.
Yeah, but that's trimmed off. But that's where a lot of people don't understand that. You have a lot of shrink loss, and the longer you age it, the more you have to trim off. And they think, well, why didn't I get back all my meat? Well, you did, but.
Some of it goes to trim.
Yeah,
the longer you hang it, the more trim there's going to be, because the cap of fat's going to have to be trimmed off.
Yep.
It'll get maybe a little bit of mold on it or something like that, but that's all gets trimmed off.
It's healthy mold. It's not bad mold anyway. So.
No, but it's unappetizing to look at to most people, so they want it rejected. They want all that trimmed off. Now, as I mentioned, 5 weeks is where I like to eat a high grade carcass.
Right.
What happens after that? Is the shrinkage?
Yeah. Once you get past the 14-day period, you don't really, most studies have shown that 14 to 21, you don't really get any more tender after that point. It's just the nutty flavor that begins to take up after that. And then depending on what the customer wants, then we trim it down, cut it into steaks.
I had a couple of T-bones one time that were given to me by a guy that had a box loin in his cooler that he had basically lost. And these things were 4 months. They were 4 months old. The flavor was basically the same as my 5-week age, but the rest of the thing was trim.
Right.
It had just dried out to the point where it wasn't beef anymore. It was just trim. I have heard that there are some restaurants out on the high-end markets on the East Coast that are experimenting with 120-day dry age. That's Eric, that's marketing, I think.
Yeah,
I don't think you're getting any benefit out of that. You just got an extremely, extremely expensive steak.
Right.
Because you threw most of it away.
Yeah, you made prosciutto.
And you got to make money on whatever. Yeah, made prosciutto out of it. But dry age is popular. There are a lot of places that advertise wet age.
Correct.
Wet age seems to me a way to market storage in the cryovac.
Right.
Because wet age means you just didn't take it out of the cryovac.
Right. Right.
You left it in its own myoglobin. You're marinating it in its own blood.
Yeah.
And calling that age. And are the processes similar?
They are similar. The only difference is when you bring it out of the cryovac, then you don't have that enormous shrink loss that you do when the moisture is coming out as a aging. And then the taste and texture is a little bit different.
Quite a bit different.
Yeah. Because you're not experiencing that. But at the same time, you got to be careful because that product can get gassy in the vacuum pack, and then you got a whole other issue to worry about. You know?
Oh, you mean if the cryovac, we're talking about the plastic wrap,
right?
If that blows up,
yeah,
then you've got to throw it away, right?
Or trim the daylights out of it to get down to something good. And
Well,
depending on what it is, you may not be able to trim that much. You know,
you might not.
I've had it on similar things where, like on a T-bone short loin, you got so much loss from trimming down the bone to get, to nice bone. And then, of course, the fillet side is just almost demolished because it's not any good anymore. So if you want to go that route.
Yeah, dry age is my preference. Do you deal with any specialty kinds of meat, like bison meat or anything like that?
I've had a lot of requests for it. The problem is getting it.
It's probably all already sold before you have.
Yeah, there's a
shot
company
it.
out of South Dakota that specializes in a lot of it. Their minimums are what kill me. I can't meet their minimums.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some of them are 1,000-pound order, or some of them are a certain dollar amount or whatever. And so, if you're in the metro area, then they can hit several different stores at one time and make up that. But us being in Wichita Falls, it's like being in Timbuktu.
Yeah, it is, in fact, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
The beef industry considers bison beef at this point?
I don't know that they consider it beef, but I know there's a lot of customers that are thinking that way on it, just a leaner.
Zoologically, it's regarded as beef.
Right.
But in terms of bison beef, I've had it before. I've had a good ribeye that was fatty. It was a nice graded ribeye. So I know they'll grade if they're fed. But God Almighty, it was expensive.
Yeah,
it's just that's a high end product, and I don't know that it's worth the extra money, but. The one I had was good, but I've never actually sought it out.
Yeah. Well, and they, what on top of what makes them expensive is they will basically have one type of breed of it, and then you have to go through all the federal regulations and inspection and stuff just like you do the other one. But the end result, you have to find somebody that can actually have an animal that size, in a chute to be able to process.
I guess that does produce some interesting kill floor problems, doesn't it?
Longhorns are the same way. I mean, you've got to be able to accommodate that animal coming through into your chute,
Right, and most people are not going to mess with a longhorn.
Right.
Is there a market for breed-specific beef?
There didn't used to be, but I think there's getting more and more so. But,
Angus was obviously, the Angus people have done a great job of marketing their
Angus,
cattle.
Limousin, Red Angus, all of them have done a great job at, and they do well in this area.
Right.
If you go into some other areas, they prefer Hereford brand, because they do well in that area. So it depends on the breed.
Is there a market for Indicus beef? And by that I mean what we call Brahman or Bramer, the way it's pronounced around here.
Yeah.
That is basically all going to be low grade beef.
Right. And I don't.
Is there a market for it specifically?
The only thing I would see is the hump. I hear the hump's a delicacy.
Really?
Yeah. I've never had it, but
never heard of it being for sale.
Yeah, but I've been asked before, and they tell me it's a delicacy.
Huh.
So
interesting.
Yeah,
well,
it's supposed to have a real super sweet flavor and really tender and.
Interesting. I don't even know what the hell's in that hump. It's a big ugly outfit. I do know that.
It's brutal on if you're on the back of it. I know that.
Yeah, yeah. The other types of beef in the world would be Highland cattle from Scotland.
Yeah.
Those are supposed to be excellent.
Yeah.
I've never had the opportunity to buy any, but I hear it's real high grade, excellent beef. But there's so little of it available.
Right.
I don't know how you'd ever get a shot at any of that.
No, not either.
The British breeds are primarily what turn into the higher grades of beef in the United States. That would be Angus, obviously, and Hereford, and Devons and Shorthorns, and things like that you see occasionally.
Oh yeah, yeah. But I think everybody's got to kind of do whatever goes best for their area,
Right.
and whatever you've got a market for. There's a couple companies out there, and I don't remember the exact name of them, but they specialize in Hereford, and they do a good job marketing it too.
Mm-hmm.
And occasionally I get people from out of town with the Air Force Base that are asking for that, particular
For Hereford
brand.
beef.
Yeah, and but I've not been able to get it through my suppliers.
Everybody wants them black. Everybody wants to kill black cattle because the assumption is that it's going to grade higher.
Yeah,
And to a certain extent, that's probably true.
yeah,
But I would imagine there are markets for some of the other British breeds. I bought 5 Devon steers and fed them out myself several years ago, and they were excellent.
yeah.
They were excellent. I guess yak meat is beef. You ever heard of it?
I guess it would be.
It would be beef.
Yeah,
What else would be? What else would be beef? I guess water buffalo is technically beef. Those aren't raised in the United States.
but there
that
again,
I know of.
it all comes down to the
Yeah,
feed that they're fed in the end. To
Yeah, well, and the genetics that they, a Cape buffalo is beef, but he's going to be a lot of trouble to kill. He'll be a hell of a bunch of
I
trouble.
don't want to be
kill.
anywhere around that.
No, limousines are bad enough. God Almighty. So, who is the customer for this high end beef? Who do you sell this stuff to? We don't. You have a completely different market down at your shop
I do.
than Walmart. Who comes in your store?
We, believe it or not, we get a big variety of people, and it's because somebody that may not normally buy a high end steak or doesn't want to go to Texas Roadhouse for a steak or whatever, they'll come in for birthday or for Valentine's Day or whatever and spend the money on that high end.
What they
steak.
perceive to be a special occasion.
Yeah.
But you're not that much more money than the
not-
grocery store.
We are not. Absolutely not. And, a lot of people, once I put that steak on the scale and they see how much it costs, they're surprised, and it's like, because it's not out on the counter with a pre-label that tells them exactly what it is and how many is in
before they even
there. Yeah.
lay it up on the paper.
And a lot of people shop by dollar-wise, they'll see, wow, I got 4 ribeyes for the price that I would have bought 2 over there, but they're going to gnaw on those and they're not going to do that on mine. So,
Right. But really, you might be $2 a pound higher than Walmart, maybe 3, but you're not twice the money.
No, not.
And I think that surprises a lot of people. And you've got some stuff in there, like we talked earlier about tri-tip.
Right.
Tri-tip's a popular cut of beef in California, but most people around here don't know what the hell it is.
Well, and picanha is becoming another
Picanha
popular
looks
one.
like a tri-tip,
Yeah.
kind of, and it's tri-tip's a little better.
Oh, yeah.
But that's not a lot of money.
No.
And it's commonly available in restaurants on the West Coast,
Right.
but you don't see it much around here. A tri-tip is that out of the sirloin?
It actually, if you're on the carcass of the beef on the backside of the sirloin tip, it's about halfway down, and you start to carve it there, and then it comes down to the joints where the sirloin and the tri-tip and the peeled knuckle and the flank, they all kind of come together at what they call the pin bone, and they're all seamed out from that point.
Right.
But, yeah, it's got a different grain than what normally you would see on the round side of it.
Where does that end up if they don't take it out of the carcass as a tri-tip? Does that end up in the sirloin, or does it end
It'll
up
end up on the sirloin and the sirloin tip.
Right.
It used to be
It'll be a piece of one of those cuts.
Yeah, we used to do a bone-in cut called a cattleman's, and it had basically top sirloin, filet mignon, and tri-tip all in one piece of meat.
Right.
And everybody loved it because they kind of got, they're so big that you got to split it with like 5 different people, and everybody got a little taste of everything.
Do you ever sell that? That sounds like an interesting steak.
I would have to be back on carcass beef, which I hope to be someday, and do that. But yeah, it is an interesting steak. When I was on the West Coast, we sold a lot of them.
I've never even heard of that. That sounds interesting.
It's got a bone in the center of it,
right?
And then top sirloin's on the top. Tri-tips comes off the tail end of the top sirloin, and then the fillet's on the bottom side of the bottom.
What's it, about 5-6 pound cut?
Yeah, about 6 pounds.
Right.
Yeah, at an 1.25 inch, 1.5 somewhere.
Well, that sounds interesting.
It's good.
Oh, I bet it is. So, what are you guys going to try to do eventually? You mentioned you hope to get back into side beef. I hope you get into side beef myself. The problem with side beef is USDA inspection.
Correct.
Now, if you're going to sell beef, that be to retail, that beef has got to be inspected.
Correct.
Now, there is a plant down in Seymour that I do business with, and those guys do what's called custom kill.
Right.
Now, if I take my steer down there and set up a kill date with them, and I have him in the pen Sunday afternoon, they'll kill him Monday morning for me. Is he inspected? If he's not being sold to anybody but me, I think he is.
He is inspected, but not as rigorous as if they're going to do it for resale.
Right.
The inspector will look over the plant, do their pre-op, make sure everything's legit. For the most part, they'll probably leave for the day and go on to some other plant, and this is in smaller operations. And then
all of these places are smaller operations.
And then whoever that business owner is has the right to go on and go ahead and process the animal and everything. Right. And then it has to be stamped not for sale. Now, if it's going to be sold
not for sale means that an end of this side, these two sides, this beef, which is the term for if I'm going to buy a steer to kill for my own purposes to hang in two sides, he's called a beef.
Right.
Right. And so if I'm bringing you a beef, it's stamped not for sale, and it's understood that goes to me and me only, and that I can't sell it either.
Nope.
Right. I have to put it in my freezer.
Yep.
Right.
And all of your packages should be stamped not for sale, so that I can't go take it from you and then try to resell it in my facility. So
right.
And then the difference is the inspector stays on the premises through the other inspection, and then they have to all either have their seal bug, which is a little stamp that says what their establishment number is and everything.
That's the little purple dye they put on the fat.
And it should be graded. It doesn't have to be graded, but it should be graded to some point. And then you're allowed to do that at your facility. But once you sell that to somebody else, then they're not allowed to go ahead and turn around and sell that to another retail business. They can sell it to their customers, but that's the end of the line.
Now, can I buy side beef from a plant? Could you get me a side if you had a place to hang it?
If it depends on the company that you're wanting to buy it from, depends on their HACCP plan, how they release that animal at the end of the process.
What is the HACCP plan?
It's a federal guideline that you have to establish with either state or federal, saying, okay, here's the process that we're going to do for every single step of the way through the animal. And then at the release time, it'll either be boxed, vacuum sealed, or it'll be hung and transported via this machine to whoever. So
you're going to declare the distribution pathway of that beef,
right,
before it's dealt with.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And everybody's is different. It depends on what they've come into agreement with state or federal.
So if I want to go do business with a plant that will sell me a side, they will declare that at the onset of the process.
Correct.
And I'll end up with a hanging side of
right.
beef. And how would I see? That's what I would love to do.
Right.
I'd love to do that. It'd be cheaper, easier than me dealing with my own cattle, since I just want to eat them.
Right.
And if I could buy a side, man, that would be pretty cool. I wonder if I can do that in Fort Worth. Would I have to go pick the side up? Would they deliver it? How's this done?
That would be on their side, depending on how they would release it to you.
Right.
And a lot of times, like when we've done business in the past with companies like that, one company said, okay, it's got to be in a cargo bin with a tarp over the top of it. It's not a tarp, actually, but it's a visqueen wrap. That's the only way they would release it. We had another one that they would release it, but they'd have to bring it to us in a regulated temperature truck, and then, they could send it over to us. So it just depends on what their regulations are that they've set up through their HACCP plan.
Right. But it's possible to buy side beef.
Yeah.
The advantage, as far as I'm concerned, of buying side beef, and we mentioned this earlier, is the hamburger.
Right.
If I've got a carcass, if I got a side that I've hung for 5 weeks, I'm going to get all of the 4-quarter roasts, all of the rib stuff, all the loin, all of the sirloin, all the round meat, and everything left over gets ground into delicious dry-aged hamburger. Now, it's difficult to explain to people that have never had this just how good dry-aged hamburger is. Now, you've had this.
Absolutely.
And it's the most amazing product.
I agree.
And it's people don't understand how good this shit is.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely the delicacy that you don't get to eat unless you've gone through the process of purchasing the side and having all of the rest of the side processed and packaged and everything, and then everything left over gets ground into 80-20 hamburger.
Right.
And it is just absolutely the damnedest thing you've ever had in your mouth. And if there's no other reason to do it, that's why you buy side beef, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, the smell, the taste, everything is different. I mean, it's just, you actually smell beef.
It's really, people that just have never had anything but a grocery store hamburger don't understand the nature of this product.
Well, and most people that buy a grocery store hamburger don't realize that the minute that animal comes out of the chill machine and has met their regulations to whatever they decide that has to be on their HACCP plan, they begin trimming and processing it on it. So that animal hasn't even been gone maybe an hour and a half, and they begin, and your 100% hamburger may not be, it's going to be 100% beef, but it may not be off of what you think it's going to be.
Right.
It may be parts of the tongue. It may be parts of, tendons or whatever. It's going to be.
They can put anything they want to in hamburger, pretty much.
Yeah.
There must be some limitation on putting salivary glands and pancreases.
Oh,
and
yeah.
stuff
There's,
but skeletal muscle.
Right.
Any components of that can be in the hamburger, right?
Yep.
Tongue. They can put tongue in hamburger.
They can put it in there.
Tongue is good.
Yeah, it is.
As tongue.
It is.
I've got look at these kids. look at these kids.
I've eaten some.
It's lingua.
I've eaten on tacos.
The Spanish language calls it lingua,
Yeah.
and it's excellent.
Yep.
It really is excellent. And
I've had it where you boil it and then you peel the outer skin off.
Yeah.
Let it chill down, slice it thin.
Slice it thin.
And then bread it and fry it.
Oh,
That sounds good.
it's good.
Super
It's good. If you never had it, you need to try that. It really is
The texture is different.
excellent stuff. I can't imagine wasting
It's actually
a ton
really
on a
smooth.
hamburger.
I mean, it's just,
Oh yeah, it's good.
yeah.
It's excellent. There's all kinds of things that people don't think about eating.
Sweet bread.
Sweetbreads are excellent. Sweetbreads are the pineal gland. Sometimes they call the pancreas a sweetbread. They're two different organs. Pineal gland is a large gland in a calf, and the older the animal gets, the smaller it gets until the animal's 2 years old, and eventually the pineal gland's been absorbed and it's not there. So anything that's got a decent sized sweetbread in it is a young steer.
Mm-hmm.
But that is amazing stuff.
Yep.
Mountain oysters,
Yep.
calf fries, we call them. That's you people. I mean, it's good. It's got a fabulous flavor. It's hard for you people in Brooklyn and San Francisco to understand this, but we know things that you don't, and that's one of them. All right, but,
Hanging tender, a lot of people.
hanging tenders, or that's there. I'm seeing that for sale in places.
Yeah.
That's a piece of the diaphragm muscle.
Yeah.
And
It
it's
doesn't
right
have
up
a lot
there.
to do, but it's good.
It's an awfully good piece of meat.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that doesn't last. If you dry age a carcass, 5 weeks, you've got to take the skirt steaks out
Yep.
and the hanging tenders out
Yep.
because they're exposed and they'll dry out into jerky
Yep.
and you can't use them.
They have no fat over them or anything to be able to.
So you take those two pieces out, after 5 days. You want to get those out of there immediately, but then the rest of the carcass goes ahead and ages. But hanging tender I've seen on menus now.
Yeah.
And it's good beef.
Yeah.
It's damn good beef.
I used to carry it in the shop. The only problem is now they're offering it frozen, and once
Right.
it gets frozen, then I try to put it in the case, and it doesn't have a very good appearance for very long. So
Right.
I have to kind of steer away from it. But yeah, it's amazing piece of meat.
Yeah. It's got about twice as much flavor
Oh yeah.
as the other beef. It would be like cheek meat. You ever seen in a Mexican restaurant, cabeza,
For barbacoa.
barbacoa? Same thing. Head meat, cheek meat. Stuff's rich. Has a very, very strong beef flavor.
Yeah.
It's delicious. Oh, God, it's good. So if you only eat ribeyes, you're missing out on a lot of excellent food.
Yeah.
If you've got if the ick factor is strong in you, you need to grow up. Okay? Because I have seen and I've eaten in a restaurant in Dallas udder meat.
Yeah.
Oh, God. I had no idea. I just ordered it because I had never seen it before. My God, that's good. It's just, look, open up. Broaden your horizons.
Yeah.
There's a world of good food out there if you'll just quit being a little titty baby.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. So you've got to wrap your mind around the idea that you don't know all there is to know about what tastes good until you experiment around with it. And guys like Eric here can help you learn. And if you've got a guy like this in your area, you need to take advantage of him. Talk to him. Ask him what he thinks. Pick his brain. Ask him if he'll order you stuff. Guys like this are terribly interested in the fact that you're interested in what they do, because guys like this are important to us. And I appreciate your being here today,
You bet.
Eric.
Thank you for
very
having
much
us.
for coming down today. Eric Kennedy's at Red Barn Butchers here in Wichita Falls. And he's got a website, and that's what?
www.redbarnbutchers.com.
There's 3 W's, but we just say Red
Oh,
Barn.
okay, yeah.
RedBarnButchers.com. And you can get a hold of him there. You can call him on the phone, call him and talk to him. He'll be glad to discuss all of this stuff with you. And if he can help you, he'll do it. He's a real good guy. He's always been fabulous. When I walk in and ask him to do something stupid like make some cutlets for me, he'll stop what he's doing. Stop what he's doing and do it. So we appreciate him being here today. And we appreciate you watching us here on Sturdy Strength Radio. We'll see you next time. Bye.